Welcome back to the home front. I'm your host, Reed Galen. Today, I'm joined by Alvaro Bedoya. He was sworn in on May 16th, 2022 as a commissioner of the Federal Trade Commissioner. He served in this role until March 18th of this year when he was, I'm going to say, illegally fired by President Donald Trump, but we'll get to that in a second. Bedoya is especially interested in how the FTC could help people living paycheck to paycheck and spend as much time as he could with small business owners, working people, and community leaders in rural and urban America. Before his confirmation, Bedoya founded the Center on Privacy and Technology at Georgetown Law and also helped establish the U.S. Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Privacy as its first chief counsel. A naturalized citizen born in Peru, he co-founded the Esperanza Education Fund, the first status-blind college scholarship for immigrant students in D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, worked as a field researcher for the International Labor Organization's Special Action Program to combat forced labor, was a lawyer at Wilmer, Cutler, Pickering, Hale, and Doyle, served as a nonprofit board member of the Hispanic Bar Association and the District of Columbia and CASA. He graduated summa cum laude from Harvard College and holds a JD from Yale, served on the Yale Law Journal, and was the recipient of the Paul and Daisy Soro Fellowships for New Americans. Boy, Alvaro, welcome to the show. I'm not sure we have time after that extensive,
I
resume.
Have warned you to just say this is a guy in Maryland.
No, this is just a guy in Maryland. Well, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Reed. I appreciate it.
No, thank you. And I saw you, I think, being interviewed on Substack somewhere, but then that led me to an article you wrote in the New Republic entitled "Why I Became a Populist." And I must tell you right at the top, I'm right there with you. I was a lifelong Republican, left the GOP when Trump came around. You've had your own dealings with them, but it is the one thing that I think, as I was reading your article, that really brought what we saw, I think, in common together, which is when we get out of our lucky spaces, the places you and I have been so fortunate to be in, and you get out into places where Americans are doing everything they can to live day to day, paycheck to paycheck, that's really what turned me around. So give us a sense of your trip through the FTC, what you saw, and now, after having been, again, I think illegally dismissed, how you see the world.
Sure. Well, let me try to take a stab at that. To the Federal Trade Commission as a pretty traditional left versus right liberal. I had done a whole bunch of work on immigrant rights. You mentioned I have had a longstanding interest in privacy rights, and that cuts across a little bit across party lines, or a lot across party lines. But I'd spent a lot of my life fighting for immigrant rights, and I was very outspoken about what I saw as the president's xenophobia and bigotry in his first term. And as that essay in the New Republic says, I got in, I just squeaked into office. Like, no Republican voted for me, and Vice President Harris had to go to the Capitol to vote for me 3 separate times, which made me very popular with her staff.
I'm sure.
Oh yeah, it was a big hit. Reed, when I got in, you get all these invitations to, CES in Vegas, to these competition conferences in Brussels, to Davos, to the Aspen Ideas Festival. And I resolved not to do those, and instead to try to do my best to just go meet with the people I was supposed to be working for. And I won't give you the whole, set of trips, but I focused on, your kids, your food, your health, your job, and your food, your health, your job was really the focus on it. So I went so my wife's from Louisiana, and we've got a whole bunch of family all across the state. And so I went to a lot of places in rural America, a lot of places in urban America. And I think if I could boil down the takeaway I came from was, I'll just tell you about 2 of my most recent visits. One of the last visits, not the very last one, but one of the last visits I did was in New York City with a bunch of rideshare drivers. And, these are folks, almost all of them immigrants, Asia, South Asia, African, Central and South American. And one by one they came, and we were in a law school lecture hall. They sat in front of me. And everyone was like, I've been driving 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. I have a 5-star rating, 4.9 rating. I've done 20,000 rides, 5,000 rides. These are all really good drivers. And they were there because they were waking up in the morning, opening up their phones to drive the morning commute, and they were locked out of the apps. Uber and Lyft had locked them out. They wouldn't tell them why. They wouldn't tell them how to fix it. And these people were despairing. They were in a panic. They were going into credit card debt. The few that weren't locked out would literally drive for 11, 12, 13 hours because the moment they stopped to go to the bathroom or to eat, they'd get locked out. One guy showed up. His wife had actually died that morning. And he still showed up because finally someone was going to listen. One of that, I mean, that visit is just burned into my head. But then I had another visit that was very similar. And it was not in an East Coast city. It was not in DC. It wasn't in Boston. It was in Ankeny, Iowa, which is about a half hour, 45 minutes north of Des Moines.
I have been there. I've been to all 99 counties in Iowa.
Oh, I'm sure you have. That's right. Of course you have. And so is it. There, one by one, the farmers came up. And this was my second visit to the Des Moines area. And they were saying, hey, look, I used to have 12 places to buy seeds from. Now I have 2. I used to have 3 places to process my cattle. Now I have 1. And, I used to have, and so in other words, all their input prices were going up. The sale prices of their products were going down. But then finally at the very end, this one guy stands up. His name was Sean Dengler. And he's tall, he's thin, he's got long hair. And he says, I am a 5th generation farmer. I was a 5th generation farmer in Tama County. This last harvest, I got up, I turned on my John Deere combine, and it wouldn't start. And a couple of years ago, I could have taken that tractor to the guy down the street who would have fixed it up for us at a pretty decent rate. But John Deere had locked the software down on the combine that me and my dad own outright, and such that only John Deere could fix it. And the soybeans were already dry, so they needed to do a rush job. And it was the added expense of John Deere putting him through that it made him leave farming. And I never forget, he said, and I'm the last Dengler who will ever farm in Tama County. And if I can put in one idea what I learned at FTC, I was previously the guy who would put those rideshare drivers and Sean Dengler on a piece of paper, and I'd be like, oh, well, you're white, 5th generation business owner in Iowa, and you all are immigrant rideshare workers in Manhattan. You have nothing in common.
Mm-hmm.
But now I think they have everything in common because all of them are getting crushed by these monopolies and duopolies. All of them need a government that takes their needs seriously, gives them a level playing field against these behemoths, and none of them are getting it. And I think that if we reorient the way we look at our country, less in terms of left, right, race, religion, party, red, blue, and more in terms of what people need, all sorts of coalitions are going to open up that seemed impossible before. And so that in a nutshell was my journey at FTC.
Yeah, and look, I've had a very similar journey myself. Just last week, as we're recording this, I was down in North Carolina, and I went to see my friend Mondale Robinson, and he is mayor in Enfield, North Carolina, Halifax County. It's about 3,000 people.
Yeah,
and he said they have something called 21st century redlining, which is it's very hard to get a job in Enfield. There's not a lot to be had in the first place, but even those people who could work remotely via online work, the upload and download speeds aren't fast enough because nobody will extend the broadband out to a broken down rural town like Enfield. And the all the buildings are in town are owned by one family, a white family.
wow.
Who ran the place for 1 million years, won't sell the buildings, won't fix them up, and also privatized the fire department, right? So like now the city has to contract with a fire department owned by a family, or if they want a fire to be put out. So to me, it's just Alvaro, if there's one of these stories, as you're seeing, there's a million. If it's going to, a tough neighborhood in Grand Rapids, or hearing stuff and I'm like, oh yeah, well, housing is a crisis. Well, yeah, like housing is a crisis, but I'll tell you this, like a lot of the places I went, people had a place to live. It wasn't very nice, and they didn't have anything else. And they certainly didn't have any security. And this is the other part, was about the FTC or the Consumer Protection Financial Bureau. All of these, it's like, no, this is actually what government is for. Is right now, the U.S. government, however you feel about it, left, right, center, otherwise, is an appendage of corporate America at best, in my mind.
Yeah. There's so much, I would say, there is so much potential for when these folks who, on paper look nothing alike, unite. Because I actually, And that's what our country did to give us these laws. And this idea that our government should not be controlled by corporations existed kind of at the founding. Not exactly, but kind of at the founding. You know, Thomas Jefferson famously said there was an amendment missing to the Bill of Rights against monopoly. The Boston Tea Party wasn't just a protest against the British Crown. It was a protest against the British Crown giving a monopoly on tea to the Dutch East India Company. And now, we used to have, at the end of the 19th century, start of the 20th century, real life coalitions of workers, farmers, and small businesses who passed laws and carried political weight. So I worked for years for Al Franken, and we don't have a Democratic Party in Minnesota. We have a Democratic Farmer Labor Party, which is an artifice of that same coalition. And yet now you walk up to people and say, hey, you have a lot in common with people, the farmer in rural America, or that like the reason you have this food desert here in Philadelphia is the same as they have it, in Pine Ridge, South Dakota. They'll look at you like you're crazy. Mm-hmm. But like this used to be the meat and potatoes of politics, and now it's the side dish that people are like, yeah, we all agree it's a great side dish, but like we're doing politics here. We should focus on something else. And that strikes me as completely nuts. But no, I couldn't agree with you more.
Well, I don't want to make light of it, but you might remember, I think it went back to 2016, Alvaro. There was a Saturday Night Live skit starring Tom Hanks as a rural man wearing a MAGA hat, and he was on Black Jeopardy.
Okay.
And he keeps giving these answers that Kenan Thompson, the host, and I can't remember who the two other cast members were agreeing with it. It's like, so this is how votes get counted in elections. And he buzzes in and he goes, we all know that stuff's all decided ahead of time. And they're like, yes, Doug, yes. And it was so funny because it was such a brilliant portrayal of what you're talking about. Was here they had the send up of the, sort of stereotypical MAGA, the send up the stereotypical African Americans, and they agreed on so much. It was one of those where obviously satire and humor was such a great way to pose that message. But to your point, it's really easy for us to get stuck in. I was on television earlier today talking about the East Wing of the White House. Alvaro, like, you've been to the White House. I was lucky enough to work there. My office at Treasury a million years ago overlooked the East Wing. All those things like have a sort of a nostalgia for us. But the average person, like, okay, that's stupid, but like, what do you want me to do about it? Right? Yeah. Like, this is not on my list of things to worry about. And it seems to me that we're also set up in a system where everything, and I don't want to sound conspiratorial, but we're set up in a system to distract from everything but what's actually going on. Just one more thing. When I was in Durham last week, I met with Pastor Nixon at his church at St. Joe's AME Church. And he said, in the 80s and 90s, when there was a crack and cocaine epidemic in Black neighborhoods, it was a public safety issue, right? And I know you went to West Virginia, when the opioid addiction hit Appalachia, it was a public health crisis. He's like, see, they don't even talk about it in the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fascinating. Oh shoot, you just said something that rang off bells for me. Oh, the East Wing. So like, here's what I tried to tell people in the last 24 hours, and you talk about the East Wing, which is like you said, for people like me and you, like, it has this special significance, but like most people don't wake up in the morning and think about the Constitution or think about institutions the way, we might. And so what I've been saying is this, like, has an unbridled view of his authority, and he uses it. You think about the ends, right? He's quite effective at using it. And so this guy had to move mountains in order for his originally $250 million, now $300 million construction project to move ahead during a shutdown. So the move he did was he's getting these quote unquote settlements / bribes / payoffs from his CEO buddy. So Alphabet's like, sure, we'll write you a $25 million check for kicking you off YouTube when you tried to stage a coup at the government. So he's getting all these defense contractor buddies to build his golden ballroom. And he's funneling the money through the trust, the National Trust for them all. And then he's now using the military to build it. So like, look, like if it weren't so, immoral and, for there to be a golden palace, at the White House,
right? It's
actually kind of impressive. This guy's like, who cares? There's a shutdown. I'm going to do this. I'm going to get that guy to bribe me. I'm going to do this. It's actually really impressive. But you'd be like, if only he used a fraction of that energy to help the families whose EBT cards are going to stop working on November 1, whose SNAP benefits are going to cut off. These are people. So in Maryland, you got to earn like $2,000 or $3,000 for a family of 4 to get these benefits. So these are people who are barely making it. And this guy, like, and by the way, he also found $6.5 billion to pay soldiers, which is awesome. And I fully support. Right? But like, he can find ways to get money, large amounts of money, and you won't hear him say a single word about what's happening to these benefits. And like, people are freaking out. Like, you go to Reddit right now, because there's all these communities of people who have SNAP benefits and they give each other advice. People are buying MREs. They're buying MREs. They're buying powdered milk. They're buying eggs. They're like, so they don't know. No one has any idea whether the cards, even if they have a balance, are going to work on November 1.
Right.
So they're just going to the store and just stocking up like it's a hurricane coming.
Yeah.
And
for them it is.
And for them it is. But this guy won't even lift a finger for them, even though he does whatever the heck he wants. And so that for me is what I've been telling people. Because like for me and you, like like it is a secular monument to our nation, right? The White House. But like, that's us. We're kind of weird.
Right. And lucky.
Like,
and really lucky.
Exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. But that's how I see it. I think you're exactly right about that.
Well, and that's the one thing too, and you noted a bunch of these things in your essay is, again, I think it's so important for anyone who has the ability, who has a voice, who has a vision, who believes that the country can and should be better, get out of the bubble in which they live. Because I think it's really easy to say, I went to a No Kings thing. I did my part. Okay. But
how do we do that? How do we do that? I think about this, but I don't know how we do that, because we had jobs that let us do that. Most people don't have that luxury, right? Like, how do we do that?
Well, I think, it's fascinating you bring up Reddit, right? Because this is where, like I said, I was writing something, and I said this, it's like the billionaires are going to be fine, right? The corporations, they're going to be fine. And the people below the line, like you're talking about, they long ago figured out survival, right? Because they didn't have any choice. And like what you're talking about on Reddit is exactly that thing. Like, okay, what am I going to do? The EBT card is going to shut down in 7 days. What am I going to do? I got to get Halloween candy for my kids, right? I got to get at least something for a mask for my kids so they can go trick-or-treating, right? Like, so it's all this other stuff too, because as a parent, as you know, you don't want to let your kids down either. So that's now right. It's not just about whether or not a piece of plastic will work at the grocery store. It's, is my kid going to look at me with those eyes because I don't have anything for him or her to dress up in, right?
Yeah.
And so it shatters whatever is left of the ability to try and get by. As you said, 57% of the country is living paycheck to paycheck. That means less than $1,000 in the bank. I mean, Alvaro, we're the richest country humanity has ever known. And to me, the idea that even when the government is open, we are a country that has to have food pantries enrages me, right? The fact that even before the shutdown, towards the beginning of this administration, the ag department cut out billions of dollars for fresh fruit and vegetables to go to schools, all of those programs for people who don't have enough money to get food. And again, to me, that's like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And I don't have any excuse other than they take pleasure in it. They don't care. I mean, and maybe, it's there's that expression. I don't know who said it. It's the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And I think it's just mass indifference I'll blame the entire political class. We can blame the Republicans in Congress and the White House right now. But again, I think you have to go. And then
that's right.
For the individual people who are listening to this, and these are people who are going to be able to afford Halloween candy.
Yeah.
Again, for me, it's, most of the stuff is apolitical. Work a shift at a food bank, work a shift at a library, coach a team, right? If there's a family that's in trouble, make sure that they get through. If you know that the shelter for abused women and children is short on funds, give them a $50 donation, right? Make sure that your community is taken care of first, right? There's not a lot we can do, but it's something. And if we all do that, then we can help each other. And I think that's the only way we're going to get through this, because clearly, as they're bulldozing the East Wing of the White House to put up a 90,000 square foot building, which is like almost twice the size of an NFL football field, right?
Is that right?
It's
I
huge.
didn't know that. Is that right?
Yeah. Oh, I did. Yeah. It's like the mausoleum at the Taj Mahal is like 15,000 square feet. Right. So like it's an outrageously humongous thing. It's like Soviet gigantism in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
But that's what we're going to have to do. Those of us that can must. Right. Because as you know, having been out there, a lot of the towns that you're going to and that I've visited, people didn't ask for their towns to get left behind. The town I was born in, Marietta, Ohio, was a coal town. It has had a consistent population of 13,000 people for the last 100 years, right?
Wow.
If you can get out, you will get out. And my guess is, I'm talking to my friend Mondale, in his town, if someone's child gets out, they're proud. Yeah, she got out. She doesn't have to come back. And that's not how it should be. That every day has to be, in the United States of America, every day has to be a struggle for how am I going to do this?
Yeah. I am still thinking about the question you were asking about, like, how you get people out of their bubbles to see the rest of the country, because, that's why being an FTC commissioner was a dream job, because you had this little travel budget and you could go, people could call you, in North Tulsa and say, come on down. And you'd be like, yes, I'll be there in 2 days, but most people don't, right? And so one thing I've started to think about, there's obviously bigger ways. So I have two ideas. One that's more practical, but like what I want to do is see how we weave together a new alliance, coalition, whatever you want to call it, of working people, both obviously folks in unions, but even folks who aren't able to form a union.
Right.
Independent family farmers, and there's still a lot of them, there's too few, but there's still some. And, small retailers that are community focused. So independent grocers, independent pharmacists. And I've literally, Reed, started thinking, like, could I get, the guy who organizes for UFCW out here, in Maryland, just put him on a plane and his wife on a plane, and me and Seema are going to get on a plane with them and go visit my buddy, in Algona. Right. Just starting to weave these friendships together. No one's asking anyone for anything, right? But literally almost just like a homegrown exchange program. But I will say there's another thing that Europe actually does this, that the United States should do it. And the Rotary clubs, et cetera, used to play this role. I don't know the degree to which they do. Are you familiar with the Erasmus program in Europe?
I know who he is, but I'm not sure what that is.
So yeah, it's named after Erasmus, and I forget what kind of, blazing intellect that was.
He was friends with like Thomas More and Henry VIII and all that.
Okay, got it. Yeah, it was one of those guys. So they do this thing where if you are born in like Slovenia, right, which is part of the EU, you can get a scholarship to go to school in, the Netherlands, and vice versa. As long as you're within the EU, it's their way of creating a community within the EU. And like, we should have that here. Because it used to be this mixing would occur with the draft or around wars. And I don't want to start a war so people can get to know each other again, right? But like, we have no way of people actually meeting each other, because like when you actually meet in person, number one, the vast majority of people do not ask you, hey, are you a Democrat or a Republican, right? No one's like, hey, do you like Trump or do you hate Trump, right? I mean, and instead you're talking about like your kids and the how you're tired and how, what you're watching on Netflix. Like it's a completely different interaction that is missing nowadays. That was the best part of my job, right? And I just don't know how you do that, but it's something we're missing.
Well, I 100% agree, and I have said this before in my audiences. So yeah, I'm not the only one to you out there in Radio Land, because I have said that, which is 3 dimensions are important. You and I are seeing each other in 2 dimensions. I hope sooner than later we can meet in 3.
Absolutely.
But I do believe, as you experience, and I have too, that experience of humans being next to each other. I call it friction, but not in a bad way. More like Velcro.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is like you get to know someone, you meet them once, Oh, it's nice to meet you. You meet him twice. Oh yeah, how's your family? Yada yada. You meet him three
Yeah, yeah,
times. Now you're friends,
yeah,
right? And that friendship endures, and then you can start to basically create, the sort of cosmic dust of civic action. As more and more people get there, it starts to spin. It starts to take on its own life, and then good things just start to happen because now I'm not worried about the everyday. Yes, I'm worried, right? But it's like you have kids, right? And my wife always says, I just like one day. And I'm like, there's no such thing as one day when you have kids, right? There's just
yeah.
no, and that's how most people feel in their whole lives, right? I just
That's
want
right.
one easy day.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
for a
yeah,
lot of people, there are no easy days. And again, if 70% of the people in this country, I think it was a Wall Street Journal survey last month, said that they believe that the American dream is either dead or never existed to begin with, then we are so far afield from FDR, the Four Freedoms, all of the things that built what we used to call modern America, the middle class, right, which have basically been gone for 40 years now. Like, I think we can say, okay, we've reached the end point of whatever this is. This period we're in now, not good. But to your point, Alvaro, what are we going to do? And those people who want to, who can, who have the ability, who are lucky enough to figure out what the world's going to look like next.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, here is what I would say. I think that people need to focus, and I think this is already happening, but understand that there are people on the left and the right who are focused on squarely on getting people fed, getting their healthcare taken care of, and who are willing to confront the corporate behemoths that are dominating our lives in a way that frankly requires a little bit of bravery
Mm-hmm.
because in our campaign finance system, if you're not getting that sweet PAC money, it is pretty hard to launch a campaign. And so look for people running for your state Senate, your state legislature, running for state attorney general who want to have fights with the health insurance companies, who want to make sure that your Amazon warehouse doesn't injure you and doesn't give away the farm to have that warehouse come without first making sure that the rate of work isn't going to crush people's spinal cords and their wrists. And let me tell you, I mean, like some people are doing both in quote unquote blue and red places are doing some pretty cool stuff. So in Arkansas, for example, a bunch of state legislators passed a bill to break up these vertically integrated insurance giants where it's like a health insurer, what's called a pharmacy benefit manager, and then the pharmacy. Because what happens is the insurer starts preferencing their pharmacies and bankrupting the the small independents that serve the lowest income, most rural, most out of the way areas. So these Arkansas legislators got up and said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to prohibit, we're going to pass a bill to ban that. And so that's amazing. And then you have folks in blue states like Colorado passing laws against surprise ambulance bills or algorithmic rent fixing. And like to your point about the friction or Velcro, and you've worked in politics, and so like all you need is that one experience of being on the same side with someone,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like that was the bet. That's what I feel most fortunate about being a Hill staffer. It's those moments, and they become more rare over time. Where like I'm a Democrat, you and your Republican buddy are actually fighting everybody,
Yeah.
right? All
Right.
you need is one or two of those experiences, and then suddenly you get to know them a little more. You get to know their family. You trust them when they tell you something, or you can say like, all right, you say you have a problem with this. What's tell me like really what's the problem? I'll be like, all right, this is the core part of it, and so once and there's some like pyramid Maslow's or whatever it's called,
Maslow's
like
hierarchy of needs. Yeah.
Maslow's hierarchy. Like if we fight for each other to get fed, to get health care, to be able to make rent, we will naturally form alliances where some of these cultural issues that previously would just fracture us like that may not have that same purchase. And like, look, I don't, and we are headed there. But if everyone who has the resources to do so can put their money, put their votes, put their protest time, to supporting people who are focused on getting people fed, getting people taken care of, I think that'll help. And let me say something else that I think is really positive, which is I'm an immigrant and I just hit what I think was the 39th anniversary of my coming to this country. And like one of the most beautiful things about this country isn't just that it will still by and large, what's happening with ICE does change this narrative a little bit. But like, you know, what this country has given me, my brother, my mother, is unquantifiable. But there's this thing it's given us, and that it gives to young people who are raised here, which is this, and I will use this word positively. I don't mean this word negatively. This sense of entitlement to freedom, this sense of like, this is the land of the free. People should not be treated a certain way. Their government should not abuse them in a certain way. And we're talking a little about government rather than corporations. Like, I have been encouraged by the number of people I see on the right starting to speak out about what's happening in Chicago. You see some of these podcasters starting to say, like, this is bananas. Like, this cannot be what we are for.
Right.
And this has nothing to do with being an American. And so I am hopeful about that as well. Because look, like, you can be in different places in the spectrum of what you want for immigration. But I think that the large majority of people can agree that pulling the mom out of the pickup line at school, literally just there to pick up her kid from school, cannot be what this country is about. So I am encouraged about that. And I do think that we can build a better road, but it takes effort.
No, and you have to want to, and I think to your point, I think there is that. But this is the other part, as you've seen in your time on the Hill, and I assume your time at the FTC and all the other work you've done, is that it doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen by accident, right? Like, you have to want these things to happen.
That's right.
If you wanted to make it happen, and again, it's going to take a while. As I said when I spoke to the thing in Charlotte the other day, like, it took us a long time to get here. It's probably going to take us a pretty long time to get out too, but. This period will end, but to your point, it'll end a lot faster if those of us that can and want to are already locking arms, here and you and I across a video screen, but in places across the country. And I think the other part too is telling those stories, right? Like you did in the New Republic. I think telling those stories is important because frankly, those stories don't get told anymore. Right. They don't, whether or not it's because, the local news is gone or because it's just not that interesting or because media doesn't want to cover it. Whatever the case is there are stories to be told, each and every one of which are either more inspiring or heartbreaking, right? Depending on where you go and what day you've gone there. So, all right. So Alvaro, now that you are free of government service, we'll call it, how are you spending your time?
Yeah. So I am trying to solve this problem. So real quick, so like when I got out, first of all, I was out a couple tens of thousands of dollars, and I was lucky to have had that savings cushion. But we spent it. We had literally spent all the savings money we had to weather those 3 months where I wasn't drawing an income. So it was very tempting to go into the private sector, maybe work for a plaintiff's firm. But ultimately, I decided not to. But I did want to work on a hard problem. I wanted to work on something hard. And this is what I'm trying to chip away at now. So we have this problem in the law, which is this. If the government hurts you, whether it's President Trump or President Biden or President Obama, or President Bush, whoever, right? The federal government or state government hurts you if they try to take away your voting rights, if they try to take away your free speech, if they try to legally deport you, if they try to illegally fire you. If you're a small business and the government tries to illegally screw you, right? Which is a thing that happens to small business. There's actually a pretty well-developed and pretty well-capitalized set of nonprofits on the left and the right who will take on that fight for you pro bono, legally, in court. Okay? And some of them are scrappy and they struggle to pay the bills, right? But some of these nonprofits have tens of millions of dollars, some have hundreds of millions of dollars. And so thank goodness that these folks exist right now, right? When we have one of the most authoritarian presidents I probably we've ever seen in this country. Thank goodness we have that infrastructure. But here's the thing. If one of the oligarchs over the president's shoulder at the inauguration tries to hurt you, if, Bezos works you so fast, so hard that like you literally have to have a vending machine on the warehouse floor dispensing ibuprofen, right? Not potato chips. Or if John Deere locks your tractor down such that you can't fix it, even though you own it outright. Or, Costco cuts a secret deal with your suppliers that makes their prices lower and makes their prices lower and your prices higher, not because they're more efficient, but just because they have market power that bankrupts the mom and pop independent grocer. There's actually very few nonprofits who will take on your case pro bono. Literally right before this call, I was talking to the executive director of a farmers union affiliate, and because I'm checking my math, right? I'm looking out there. I'm like, I don't see anybody, and so I'm literally going through and calling friends and being like, "Am I right?" And he's like, "Yeah, no, you're right. We don't have a nonprofit who will take on like an input consolidation case. Like, it's either the case is rich enough in terms of the potential payoff that like one of the big plaintiffs firms will take it on,
Sure.
or it does not get solved." And so right now, what I'm trying to do is figure out how do we grow that little league, right? Little, not little league, but like small.
No,
league,
I got you. Yes.
Right? So, and here's the other thing though: how do we make sure that immigrants aren't left behind, out of these coalitions of workers and farmers and small businesses? And so right now what I'm trying to explore is could we have a forgivable revolving loan fund for the lawyers who represent, the grocer or the wholesaler in Salt Lake, or the, independent family farmer, who is getting screwed over by their processor, by their meat packer, right? Or for the worker who's getting surveilled and worked so fast that they get injured. And so revolving loan fund, forgivable revolving loan fund for those folks, but also a set of grants for immigrant organizations that want to have some of these fights, but are so busy putting out fires that
Right.
they can't, they're so busy making sure that mom comes home and dad comes home that they can't figure out how, the nurseries that their members work at, are treating their workers right. And so I'm trying to figure out literally how to materially get these folks to have these fights because we have a totally lopsided public interest legal system. And look, maybe this made sense, when the rich actually paid taxes, when CEOs were paid 100 times their lowest paid employee, represented 1 in 10 workers. Like now they represent a fraction of that. And now, rich people brag about not paying taxes. And so that's what I'm trying to do. We'll see if it works.
Well,
I got to start, but haven't really, trying to see if I can make that happen. Yeah.
Well, listen, you gotta if you have an idea, give it a shot. The worst thing that happens is it doesn't work. You find another new idea. All right, and Alvaro, before we let you go, where can we find you? If you dare to be online, where can we find you?
Do dare. I'm right now. I'm mostly on social media. We're gonna hopefully be launching something in a little bit, but I'm at Bedoya USA on X and Blue Sky and recently LinkedIn. So trying to expand my social media portfolio, but that's where you can find me.
Awesome. As always, gang.
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, and the essay is How I Became a Populist and It's at the New Republic, and it's got a pretty soft paywall, so it's easy for folks to access.
Yeah, and I'll make sure to put it in the show notes as well so everyone can read
it.
Awesome. As always, gang, you can find me on Twitter, says.us, Blue Sky, TikTok at Reed Galen, Threads and Instagram at Reed_Galen USA, and over at Substack on the home front. Alvaro Bedoya, thanks for joining me.
I really appreciate it.
Everybody else, we'll see you next time.